Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Worlds Elsewhere Talkback with Jamie McConnaughy, our Dungeon Master from our MacDeath stream earlier this year. We were able to raise $630 to donate to Amnesty International, which is very exciting. So thank you, everyone, for your participation there. And our second reward for making our first stretch goal is going to be, we're going to have a chat with Jamie. And so we're going to talk about how she got into Dungeons and Dragons and Shakespeare. And we're going to talk about doing actual play D&D. And so please, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, go ahead and throw them in the chat and make sure that you put like Q&A next to them so that they're easier for our mods to find for us. And without further ado or don't, let us, Jamie, join us in the video. Addie will join us, and we are good to go.
We are good to go.
Nice
to be here.
Excellent. The last thing I will say is that Worlds Elsewhere does honor Indigenous land rights, and currently today we are representing the Duwamish, Coast Salish, and pronunciation. My apologies if I get this wrong, but Pequannock. And then Worlds Elsewhere itself is also based out of New York City, so that's the Munsee Lenape. And more information about that is in the program for the original show, which I believe is linked in the description of the video. So I think with that, let's get started.
Let's get started.
Excellent. So first of all, Jamie, tell us a little bit about yourself, name, pronouns, some fun fact, that sort of thing.
So my name is Jamie McConnaughy. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in Anchorage, Alaska, 32 years ago. I actually just turned 32 about a month ago. And I currently live in Southern Connecticut. I was going to make a joke about, anyone who goes to New York City must be a loser because I'm going to the city tomorrow to see the worst person in the world. But I realized that might not land, since there's a lot of people in New York City who are defensive about it. Aside from that, there's not a lot of interesting facts about me. I'm a research assistant for a professor of myths and folklores at my college, where I'm studying political science, with an emphasis in human rights, oddly enough.
You interested in human rights? I'm shocked. We will come back to that. But anything else in the general sense at the moment?
Nothing that's not gonna. I mean, I'm a massive Lord of the Rings and film nerd and theater nerd, obviously. I spend way too much money on Warhammer, just absolutely too much money. Don't ask. If you ask in the chat, like, how much money did you spend on Warhammer in the last X amount of time, I'm just like, no, that question's off limits.
So tell us a little bit more about your history with D&D and other tabletop games, and like how long you've been playing, how you got into it, how you got from there to here. Whatever you think will be interesting with that. So, that's a good place to go next.
I've been playing D&D in various permutations really since I was 11 years old. I did take a fairly lengthy break from when I was 19 to when I was about 25, because one of my DMs noted that I got really into playing lady characters, and I panicked.
Oh, the joys of gender.
Yeah, so I've always liked theater, and I've always liked games. I mentioned we were chatting before, that I can still recite the rules to the Eldar Codex from 10 years ago off the top of my head. So I like combining theater and games, and so D&D is a really good place to do that. I think there's there's elements of both really intense, difficult gameplay and in creating characters that are engaging, that are emotionally consistent. Right now, I'm actually in 4 games because I don't like having free time. One of which is DM'd by our bard from MacDeath, where I play a tiefling cleric. Another of which is DM'd by Our Lady Macbeth from Macbeth, where I play a tabaxi monk. I also play a Dhampir rogue, and there's a side, a homebrew basically expansion called Humblewood that is, it's Redwall. Like, I'm sorry, I love Humblewood a lot, but it's Redwall.
Hey, no complaints there. I grew up reading those. So.
Where I play a fox person bard.
Adorable.
And I just spend way too much time doing all this stuff. I'm looking to do more. I've also played Warhammer Fantasy RPG. I played Adventures in Middle Earth for a while there. I played some Dark Heresy and some Call of Cthulhu, not nearly as much as I want to of either. And I'm trying to find someone to GM a Soulbound game for, but I can't find that. And I've been writing a TTRPG for about 3 years now that is based pretty heavily on the X-Files and Control.
Oh, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a favorite like class or class type particularly? Because it sounds like at least right now you're all over the place, which is really cool because most people tend to hang out in a certain corner. So do you have a corner you prefer, or do you like to just be everywhere, do all the things?
So when I was younger, I used to focus pretty heavily on rangers because I'm from Alaska, and I learned how to shoot and hunt and fish. But as I started to get more into D&D, and no, this did not actually coincide with the Rangers getting nerfed. Leave me alone. Everyone thinks that. Nope. I started to want to explore alternate ways of playing because I really feel like the way I play a character is I don't look at a character and think, okay, I'm going to take the best. I'm going to take all the best spells. I'm going to take all the best items. I try to create a character that I think is internally consistent and then see what's the best I can do with this. Do accidentally create broken characters a lot.
Yeah, well, such is life. Anyhow, that's a very cool way of looking at it. A lot of people will be like, I always play a tank. And then it's like, that's great, but stretch, says someone who almost always plays a mage. So
that's what's sort of interesting. I find it really fun when characters kind of stumble into roles. Like my previous longest running character was a tiefling ranger. I play tieflings a lot. I'm queer. And because the rest of our party was a wizard, a warlock, and a bard, he sort of just wound up the tank because someone had to be. And my tiefling cleric, she's a Twilight cleric, so she's got heavy armor, she's got a shield, she can cast Shield of Fate. So she is actually, in addition to being the healer, the main tank, the person who's always out front taking the hits.
So let's change topics a little bit to the other half of the project, shall we say, that you did earlier, which is what's your history with theater in general and Shakespeare in particular, particularly prior to Worlds Elsewhere? Because for those of you who don't know, Jamie's someone who's been with us from the very beginning at Worlds Elsewhere, which is awesome. But tell us a little bit about kind of what got you into theater and Shakespeare specifically, and your history with that prior to working with Worlds Elsewhere.
So I am one of those people who started doing theatrical productions back when I was 6 or 7 years old. I think that my history with theater is I worked a lot with a local community theater up in New Britain for several years. Shout out to Hole in the Wall Theater if any of those people are watching. And I was very insecure about appearing in public for reasons that I think are fairly obvious. And so I often focused very heavily on the technical side of things. I write a lot. I did a 24-hour play where I wrote a play. I've been writing a play about the South Sea Bubble for about 5 years now. And as I've gotten more comfortable with myself, I've been trying to shift more heavily into an acting role because I do love acting. I just didn't feel okay being in front of people. Uh, as for Shakespeare, you know, am I allowed to swear in this?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So being in high school, a contrarian little shit. Um, I was very resistant to Shakespeare at first because when you're younger, even to adulthood, even to college, you are taught not Shakespeare as a person who can create stories that have meaning. You're taught Shakespeare just like almost like these very solid, very almost static works of art that people don't want to like touch too hard or they're going to break. There's a lot of really great actors who do very stiff Shakespearean performances. And so as I got older and I came to understand the language more and came to read them again as an adult, I started seeing the potential of Shakespeare, the strength that Shakespeare actually has that has kept him around, because he did write a lot of stories that were very emotionally resonant that still land today. If you haven't seen The Tragedy of Macbeth, go see The Tragedy of Macbeth. It's really good.
Speaking of Shakespeare, just for anyone who's not aware, we are beginning to prep our spring Shakespeare show, which is going to be Love's Labour's Lost in early April. So I'm going to use that for a moment to a shill, because speaking of, we are specifically taking that show and playing with it in ways that I think that our usual audience will enjoy, because it's with gender and sexuality and things like that. And so you're not the only queer one in the company, shall we say. But anyhow, I know, shocking. But yeah, so was this your first time DMing, or have you DM'd before? And we actually got a specific question from Addie. What was your most literary experience you ever had at a tabletop game, presumably other than literally getting the players to get their way through Macbeth? So yeah, tell us a little bit about your history as a dungeon master, and if you've got any fun dungeon master stories. We always love those.
So primarily up until now, I've mostly done one shots. Like this, like where it's just like one little mini adventure and that's it, because those tend to be pre-written and you don't have as much opportunity to doubt yourself. Here's the book and you're fine. I did for several months DM, I think up to a year, DM an Adventures in Middle-earth campaign because the DM's manual in that says the person who has the most Lord of the Rings knowledge should DM it. And yeah. My favorite story from that one is, for reasons that I'm not going to go into, I was trying to convince my party. They had to go talk to a high elf, not a wood elf, it'd be a high elf. And I was like, it took place after Return of the King. So I'm like, hey, you should go to Lothlorien. They're still hanging out there, because I had plans up in Lake Town. And they're like, no, we're going to go to Gondor and talk to Arwen. I was like, all right, fuck it, I can roll with that. And then they asked me, like, they were in Rohan, so how can we get to Gondor? I'm like, well, you could just take the road down to Gondor, or you could take the paths of the dead like Aragorn does. And somehow they got it in their head that would be faster. So I had to invent a whole like thing in Dol Amroth and on the Anduin to like fill time between. Like, why did you? And later, like, we thought that was us. Like, what made you think that would be faster?
Well, I suspect to a certain extent it's like, but it would be fun, right?
I think at least one player, I think at least one player was like, it would be fun. And it was really, I do like that aspect of DMing, because I invented a whole like puzzle sequence going through Dunharrow, and I had to basically write boat combat whole cloth in whatchamacallit, in Adventures in Middle-earth, because there are no rules for boat combat at that point. And so I think that that's really what makes D&D or tabletop RPGs in general so much fun, because yes, it is telling a story, but your characters can decide to go wildly off path, and you just got to roll with it.
Yes, definitely.
As for the most literary experience I've had playing a tabletop. Actually, in one of my most recent sessions with the game, DM'd by Connor, by our bard, we had this moment where my character, finally after the entire year plus of playing, comes face to face with her abusive father, and he's actually just this completely broken shell of a man at this point. And I really wanted, because she'd been looking forward to I'm gonna beat this guy to death. That was her whole desire to meet her dad again. And I really felt like that was a really good literary moment, both from him, because it confronted this character who used to be this really angry, very nasty person, with the fact that she's probably not going to ever get closure on this relationship. And I felt like that was a really good literary twist to have for that. And I'm really excited to see where she goes from there.
Neat. Let's see. So hopping around a little bit. What's it like DMing a module that's based on another piece of literary content, like a Shakespeare play? And specifically, because I know that this is something you talked about with the players, how did you keep it from just being, other than werewolf spoilers, how did you keep it from being just, okay, we're going to play the play as it is? What was that like compared to running a module that's not based on another piece of content? And how did you make sure that everybody was going to go in a direction that made sense, as opposed to just the direction that the play was already going in?
So first off, I think that the main difference between DMing just a random module and MacDeath is that on some level, everyone kind of knows the basics. That Macbeth dude, no good. We all know that going in. That King Duncan, he's not going to turn out great. But I think that creates the sort of expectation that the players, I think that if you have a good group, and I did have an excellent group, I think that the players are going to want to push back on that a little bit. A good D&D player is going to want to look at something and go, okay, but how do I know that? What can I do with that? And you saw that with, when we arrived at the siege of Dunsane Castle. I told the players going, you can do this the way they did this in the play, but you got to give me a reason why that's why you want to do. And they took it in a direction that even the writer of the module didn't think of.
I remember you commenting on that. Just as a reminder for anyone who may have missed the stream, it is linked in the description of this video. And there's also a playlist on our channel called WETC Plays, which includes all of the videos related to this particular project and any projects in the future. Mm-hmm. Once again, remind people things exist.
The end of my thought there was just playing D&D, playing any cooperative storytelling is essentially just trusting your co-authors to do a good job. And I think that when it's live, that's doubled. And I think that it is good to trust that they're going to do that.
Let's see. So a related question from Addie before we change topics from D&D perspective. Would you rather have Connor as a DM or Connor as a rogue while you're the DM?
I think I'm going to be a complete cop-out and say it depends.
I don't consider that a cop-out, but go for it.
I think that Connor as a player is very much, and as a DM, he's very much a story-focused person when it comes to playing D&D. And if he wants, I know that he's in chat, so if he wants to, he can disagree with me.
He is totally in chat right now. Yes.
I have played with players who are players who want. I played with DMs who want to be I want to tell this story. I have played with players who here is the toughest boss I can put together. Figure it out. And I've played with people who I'm going to make an entire world out of puns. That's what we're going to do today. And so I think that Connor is very much a story focused, but he's also he's not going to be the player who is going to be trying to make the DM's life miserable. He's not going to be the DM that's going to be trying to make the player's life miserable, which is good because it is. If you are a GM and your plan is to murder the players, I'm sorry, I just don't vibe with that. So I think that it really depends on if I'm very sure of myself and of the story and of the world that I'm telling, I would want Connor as a rogue because then I will be able to give him the information that he wants and needs. But if I'm like completely flying by the seat of my pants, I'm going to invent a whole new continent over here because I couldn't think of something, then I probably want Connor to be the DM because I'm not that sure of my DMing abilities.
Excellent. Addie pointed out that this is it really feels like the 100 duck-sized horses versus one horse-sized duck question. So I think she's probably right.
The 100 duck-sized horses because I'm terrified of ducks. And you just kick them. You just kick those little horses.
I'm terrified of horses, so we make a terrible team. So moving a little bit away from the gameplay theater side of things to the activism side of Worlds Elsewhere. First of all, we support trans youth wherever they may be, including in Texas. So keep an eye out on our socials. We're going to be doing something in the not too distant to raise money. We just have to figure out the details. But in the meantime, there are great resources that are already working to try to support children and their families down there. So if you can donate, please do. But to hop back to Amnesty, which was actually the charity for this particular show, you mentioned at the beginning of the stream that your mother had worked with Amnesty International, and that was part of why it was important to you. So if you'd like, talk a little bit about other human rights work you've done in the past, and if you have specific plans outside of Worlds Elsewhere of anything in the immediate that you'd want people to know about. If the answer is no, I'm not there yet, that's absolutely fine. But Worlds Elsewhere will be continuing to do its charitable work, and so definitely for both Jamie and for everyone, keep an eye out on our socials to see what we've got coming up next. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you've gotten up to charitable work wise prior to working with us.
As I mentioned, I'm a political science major with an emphasis in human rights. I'm actually working on my thesis about how climate change is a human rights issue right now, which is currently 8 pages, and I'm barely past my first point. Like I can go on about this for a while, so I won't. The answer is that I do want to go into human rights advocacy as a career, probably something to do with climate change, although I do, for some reason, I always really wanted to get into working with transgender rights. I just want to be a really good ally there.
I wonder why.
I worked for several political organizations over the course of my life, when I was in between when my mom died and when I actually went back to college. She was the area coordinator of Amnesty for Anchorage Amnesty International for Anchorage. For most of my childhood,
you're fine.
A lot of A's, a lot of S. Most of my childhood, so I would go with her to my mom was very involved in human rights work. My earliest memory is actually of going to Exxon Valdez rally when I was like 3 or 4 years old.
That is excellent.
Very cold to be out there at candlelight vigils in December in Anchorage.
That's fair, but that is an excellent.
It was always worth it, and I think that's something that I want to do with my life, because I think that's something that there's not a lot of money in it, but I think that's something that needs doing, and sort of it.
I'm hanging out with a future superhero. So other than working with Worlds Elsewhere, have you done any charity streams in the past? And off the top of your head, do you have any plans for anything in the future, or is it too soon to start thinking about that sort of thing?
So back in August of 2020, I did a charity stream called the Cageathon, where I streamed Indigo Prophecy, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human back to back to back to back.
Oh, Lord.
There's about 40 hours. The reason being, this is before, unfortunately, David Cage decided that in addition to being a terrible artist, he was also going to be a terrible. We learned that he was also a terrible human being. But I played all 4 of his games on my stream before, twitch.tv/LSR4242, if you want to come check that out. And I find him fascinatingly terrible as an artist. And so I thought that would be a fun way to raise. I was raising money for the Navajo COVID Relief Fund. I don't recall how much money we raised. As for in the future, I was actually thinking about trying to do something for Texas. I have no idea what. I feel like I wanna do another like endurance stream, because those are always kind of fun. It is fun for the viewers to watch you mentally deteriorate, and it's kind of entertaining for me as an artist, because I feel like when I'm in public, not just when I'm like obviously performing, but when I'm doing a stream, when I'm talking in this interview, there's a layer of performance that I have that when around hour 30 of playing David Cage game just completely falls away. And I find that authenticity is interesting.
So speaking of that, that's actually a great accidental transition. Thank you. Someone just threw your Twitch link into the chat. So yay. But what's it like playing D&D with an audience versus or any tabletop game versus, you know, sitting in a Zoom room or somebody's basement with your friends? Because actual play is something that's gotten really popular in the last prior to COVID, but especially since COVID. Mm-hmm. And so what is that like, knowing that you have an audience, knowing that there are people watching, as opposed to it's just you and your gang and a bag of Cheetos?
I hate Cheetos.
Or other snack of your choice.
That's a really interesting question. So I think that it is. So I'm going to compare it to normal streaming. I'm going to compare like just normally playing D&D here, streaming normally, just playing a video game and talking and playing D&D, because here playing a game on stream, there is a layer of performance, but there's also a layer of performance in normal D&D. You know, I don't have good voice for some of my characters, but you know, like my Fox Bard is from the ambiguous North. So when I'm playing as her, I use my original accent there. And I use different words, I talk in different voices for the character. So I think that transitioning this performance, the D&D performance, into just a straight for entertainment performance, I think that you're probably a little bit more on. You know, you're not going to just... I think that if you're playing it in front of an audience, you're not just going to be like, I cast this spell, you know, I do this much damage next turn. You're going to try to... We have it more oomph, but I think that they are more similar to each other than they are different.
Absolutely. I actually love how much the groups of actors and comedians and performers are playing D&D online. These days, it's definitely been so. Actually, we had a question from Meredith about whether you listen to or watch any actual play podcasts or shows, and if there are any particular ones that you suggest if people want to get into that kind of media.
So I don't, with the following caveat. So okay. I've tried getting into several of them, but the thing is, with fairly severe ADD brain, I can't just throw Critical Role on in the background while I'm trying to get some work done. It has to be something like I put Seinfeld on in the background because there are big chunks of Seinfeld I can already recite by heart. So I can't. So there is so much time investment in listening to a D&D podcast to. I have been trying to get more into some podcasts and D&D podcasts that I would listen to when I'm like walking someplace.
Okay.
Because that's who I am as a person. what's the John Mulaney quote? When I'm walking, I'm listening to a podcast, thinking about another podcast. But I don't have any that I would recommend now. Oh no, actually, I did like Trials and Trebuchets, I think it's called. Sarah Zed's podcast, D&D podcast. I thought that was kind of fun. And I, enough of my D&D groups are sitting there discussing in our like Discord chats Critical Role that I'm like, I just gotta do it. I just gotta try watching it at least. But I have actual D&D Thursday night, so I don't get to watch it live.
We don't watch. I don't watch Critical Role, but I watch Dimension 20, which is the one that spun off of College Humor, and they're a lot of fun. But watching a 4-hour chunk can be really challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so we tend to break it up into pieces rather than watch it all in a row, so that it's a little easier for us to consume. So that is definitely a tip for anyone who's trying to get into that side of stuff, is that if you have an attention issue, is don't watch it live and then feel free to pause and come back. Just so, yeah, Addie is also suggesting Dimension 20, but she also suggests either you got to make sure you have the time or that you can actually pay attention to the whole time. And Connor is also suggesting Dice Shame, which is a bunch of players from Canada, and the episodes are no longer than 90 minutes each, which is very neat.
Nice.
And he also suggests Rogue Runners, which apparently has really good production values.
And I'm going to say that on the subject of actual plays, maybe keep an eye on my Twitter. I don't want to say any more than that. A lot of stuff is still up in the air, but keep an eye on my Twitter. Don't keep an eye on my Twitter for any other reason. My Twitter is a nightmare.
I mean, Twitter's a nightmare. That's not your fault. Let's see. So before we get into a bit more of the questions from that folks have been sending in to us, who is the best boy and why is it Benedict?
So obviously it's Benedict. It's obviously Benedict. Why is it Benedict? Is Benedict is actually a really good example of what I was talking about earlier with the collaborative storytelling element, which is, so you saw during the trailer that we did kind of a practice game, get everyone to know their character sheets, get everyone to know what they're doing. Our druid, I don't want to say character names because character names have completely, Meredith's character, I had them fighting wolves. I forget the exact reason why. And there was one that they put to sleep, cast sleep on. And Meredith's like, how cute is this wolf? And I'm like, they're doing this. They're doing this. and I liked that. I liked that they just looked at a wolf and were like, I want this wolf as a pet. And that's what I mean. Like, I love that collaborative aspect where just the DM can completely surprise you and the players can completely surprise the DM.
Excellent. So speaking of characters, Connor wants to know which of your current characters would win if they were all thrown into a battle royale. So
I'm going to open this preface with I'm going to flatten out their levels, so they're all level 6, because my Tiefling Cleric and my Vulcan Bard are both level 6. My Monk is level 4, and my Rogue is only level 2. So, but if they were all at roughly the same level, I still think the Cleric would win it, because right now she's rocking with Shield of Faith, 23 armor, the Twilight Cleric ability to gain, bonus XP every turn. So she would just heal herself because she's a cleric. She would just tank her way through it.
Excellent. Let's see. So now we are getting into more audience questions. So definitely, y'all, if you have any other questions, please go ahead and throw them in there. And we're also going to get into some spoilers for the stream itself. So on the off chance that you're here and you haven't seen it, you may want to turn this off and come back to it later. But what was your personal favorite moment from the MacDeath stream?
That is a very good question. My instinct is to say that it was
This is from Meredith, by the way.
Oh, well, then it's something that Meredith did. When Meredith changed into the bat or the spider. No. I think that my instinct is to say that it was the moment where they attacked Dunsane Castle, because they had this list of options to attack Dunsane Castle. My favorite in the book is D&D players like lighting stuff on fire. They could light the forest on fire and the ashes would rain down on Dunsane, fulfilling the prophecy. But they didn't have an option for like, they're going to ask the animals to help out. And I really like that. I think that was a very in-character thing for them to do. And it forced me to ad-lib that apparently Dunsane Castle has a T-Rex.
I remember that was a great moment there.
They have a T-Rex.
And I love the whole debate about like, wait, which is actually worse here? A T-Rex or all the rest of what's going on? So also from Meredith, any tips or tricks for getting your friends who have never played D&D or other tabletop games, or who have, but it's been a while, to join you in a game? Any tips?
So I think that's getting easier. You know, what's the joke that I keep seeing on Twitter? Previously, people thought D&D would make you worship Satan. Nowadays, I think it just means you're going to have blue hair and pronouns. Which I have pronouns. I'm like, when did the blue hair come in?
Well, I mean, the pink, you're close. Definitely does not found in nature. Yeah, you got some pink.
I need to get it redyed. I'm partially colorblind, so I wasn't sure if it washed back out to blonde. Anyway, so I think that D&D is getting easier. It's getting more mainstream. You know, my uncle and aunt actually asked me about trying it at some point when my dad was in town, but he didn't want to. So I think D&D is getting more mainstream, and I don't mean that as an insult. I think that the game is in a very good spot right now. I think that you'd want to emphasize the storytelling aspect, because the crunchy stuff is kind of hard to
it can be a turnoff. Yeah
you're also going to have to be patient with people their first time. You know, I know players who have been playing for months and still don't know all the aspects of their character sheet. That has to be okay. You have to be okay with that. You have to have a DM who's okay with that and a party who is okay with that. It does mean that your games are going to take a little bit longer. And I think that you also need to make sure that they have a good experience. Like my partner tried D&D once, and their DM got mad at them for trying to use an item in a way they didn't want them to, and they've just never gone back. So you have to have a DM that you trust to not ruin it for them. And you have to have a player, like you have to be welcoming. I know that there's this idea in geek culture that you have to run through all these hurdles in order to do this or that game, and fuck that noise. You know, and I think
you definitely have my support there.
I think that it contributes to a kind of very, very distressing thing that not only keeps people up, but it makes people leave. Like, since I've transitioned, I'm at Warhammer stores, I will have people ask me like, I had a dude ask me like, well, how long have you played? You don't seem like you really know what you're doing. Like, I have played this game for longer than you've been alive, buddy. I have hit 20 years since I first played the Lord of the Rings miniature game. I know what I'm about.
Unfortunately, that is the sexism especially in the geek community is still going strong.
It is, and I think that but I think that there's just as toxic, but a lot more casual. Like, well, they're new, so it's okay to condescend to them. And no, it's not. You were new once, bitch.
Seriously, gatekeeping is bullshit. So from Sam, who is also here, say hi. If you have any favorite lines that your players came up with from during the game, if you can think of any. If not, don't worry about it. I believe we have a document somewhere that's like a list that'll probably get put up online for the funds.
Come Connor's comment about people remember the man who's going to tell their story. That was really good. Sam had a lot of really good ones, especially during the fight with MacDeath. And speaking of MacDeath, just Mike being like, I'm not worried about the party anymore. Look at the T-Rex outside. That was really solid.
Yes, it was. So
Addie doing Shakespeare quotes to go with all of her spells. Top tier shit, Addie. I know you can hear me because you're our tech person.
Well, I as her roommate / spouse, I remember her sitting there like digging through them, coming up with all of whatever, and then later on going, oh damn it, I should have used some line, I don't know what it was, for the sword. Addie, if you can remember, throw it in the live chat. But she was so funny.
You were speaking to someone.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, so you were speaking to someone whose verbal component for my Tiefling Cleric's Shield of Faith is usually "for fuck's sake." It's like the first thing she does, like, fuck's sake.
There is no reason why you have to get fancy, but getting fancy is fun.
It is fun.
I once had a character that was, I think, technically a homebrew class. They were because this was back when 5 was still in beta. So I don't know whether it actually is part of 5 now, but she was a blade singer, which meant that she played with swords, but also with music. And so she would do performance checks as part of her combat roles. And there was a point where when she was showing up at something and pulled the sword out of her sheath, and I was like, I want to do a full, full crescendo, arpeggio that goes on the entire time she takes her to pull the sword, and rolled real high, and it was amazing because it added extra damage to me and everyone nearby, which was awesome.
That's fucking rad.
Tell me, I know that you have some homebrew stuff, so tell me about some of your homebrew stuff. Speaking of homebrews.
So, for Adventures of Middle-earth, I have, and I apologize in advance, homebrew rules to play Men of Dol Amroth, Dunlendings, Easterlings, Men of Khand, Men of Umbar, Haradrim, both far and near. And I have some notes on how to play people from the Blackroot Vale and from Lostnark, because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings dork, and also Dol Amroth is one of my favorite things in Lord of the Rings. As for D&D, I did one point come up with a character who was basically I don't know how to phrase it other than Lavamancer. Like all of their fire stuff was lava. Instead, it was a sorcerer. And as I'm sure a lot of people know, I have a artificer subclass that I'm hoping to use soon called Bone Shaper, where instead of using metal and rock and wood in your stuff, you can use bone. And I'm really interested in playing that right now because I may or may not have just read Gideon the Ninth. And
that's on my list.
It's real good.
Excellent. So from Bex, what is your favorite or most memorable role that you have ever made, either as a DM or as a player, that you can think of off the top of your head?
Okay. So this is going to take a little bit of set. So my Tiefling Ranger, it was a Wild West campaign. His name was No One because it was a joke about the man with no name. And we're in the final boss against the God of War. And we had these magic guns based on the Terra that if you could, they had curses if you rolled a critical fail to use them, but you could also take their curse in order to make the enemy automatically miss or something. And I'd taken mine in order to save our monk from dying, basically. And the curse was you lose 2 HP from your max pool at the start of every day. What do I give a shit? It's the final battle. But the way you got rid of the curse was you fire a shot at something. It is an automatic crit, and both you and your enemy take the damage from it. It's like, so what happens if I cast Hail of Thorn on this gun at level 3, and he's just going to take an automatic 2d8 plus 66 damage right off the bat. And my GM was just like silent for a solid 20 seconds, like, okay. And it wasn't even a roll. It was just like, dude, you did this to me. You let me do this.
That's amazing.
It did nearly kill my character. He did actually finally get the final shot that killed the boss. But that dude, he had the best stuff because he just would not die. He had resistance to like 6. So that was such a him move to pull. Like, I got to take this guy down. Doesn't matter if it kills me.
That's excellent. So another question from Bex, the age-old question: why do DMs make animal enemies and assume the party won't try to adopt them?
The answer is the orc conundrum. Like, you can't just have an entire race of people who are evil for no reason. And so if you're going to be fighting humans, or like sentient beings, you have to come up with reasons why they are fighting, and that can get complicated after a while.
Especially if you decide you don't want to just go with the basic fantasy racism nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to cut out the like, well, orcs are evil because I say they're evil, goodbye. So once you've cut that out, it's really complicated coming up with reasons why this group of people or that group of people want to kill you. This wolf, it wants to kill you because it's hungry. You're tasty. You taste like food. And I think DMs know they're going to adopt them, and they're just like, this is just the risk I'm going to have to take.
Oh yeah, that's certainly one of those things that happens a lot. So all right, we're about 10 minutes out from when we wanted to stop. So everybody, if you have any other questions, please toss them in the chat now. I've got another one from Sam. If you were going to pick any other Shakespeare play to use a module or make a module for, what would you pick and why?
Really good question. Damn it, Sam.
Right? I know. Excellent question. I had to. I saw it and I went, nope, this one's got to happen right now.
So I want to say Richard III, because that's going to be intense. But
yeah.
I also want to do a D&D module based around Much Ado About Nothing.
That would be fun.
Right?
So would you focus on like just the romance and have it be like charisma rolls all the way down? Or would you add combat elements to make it a more standard experience? Or who the hell knows? Because we're asking you this randomly.
So to be fair, I am making this up off the top of my head.
That is fair. So noted.
First off, you would definitely want to play the war that I say men, but really, who's playing? Who has a party just full of men in D&D? All the soldiers are coming back from at the beginning of Much Ado.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, who has? I can't remember the last time I had a party that was all full of men. That could be just because I'm in all of them. We are not going to deal with that. No, so I do think that you'd want to play that part, and I think that if you wanted to make it a more traditional D&D thing, you'd want to introduce elements that could come back into the main. This villain gets away and he attacks the wedding or whatever. But I do think it would be a very character interaction heavy thing. I think that my big hot take is what is the name of the main couple in that? Not the two that people actually like, the ones who are like getting married, and one of them gets like,
Hero is the girl,
yes,
and Dipshit is the boy. Hero, I don't remember his name.
You cannot have Hero. You could not have Hero and Dipshit be player characters. Those would have to be NPCs off doing their own.
I mean, they're both footballs anyway, so you couldn't have them be played by player characters, and you'd probably, depending on who you're working with, would want Beatrice and Benedict to be NPCs as well. But I could totally see that would be fun. And Claudio. Thank you, Sam.
I'm sticking with dipshit.
No, Sam says Claudio can get bent. So like we're all on the
Claudio
same page
can't
here.
get bent. Everyone hates Claudio.
which shocks no one whatsoever at all, knowing this crowd, because oh my god, is he dumb. But yeah, so we're getting close to the end. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I could plug my creative stuff.
Sure, sounds perfect.
I mean, if in the last 8 minutes, if anyone wants to ask me a question about my X-Files reviews, I literally am working on my review of the second movie, which means I only have the reboot seasons left to do.
Oh, I never bothered with the reboot seasons. You'll have to let me know if how
not
terrible.
Though, if I'm being totally fair, seasons 8 and 9 were not great either. Like, I know The Lone Gunman didn't last long, but I think it was better than season 8.
Oh, that's a debate for another time, shall we say? But
I said I think.
Okay, so Addie says, "What's your favorite X-Files arc?"
Well, obviously, the greatest romance in the world. I'm gonna be totally frank. Of the X-Files stuff, I don't like the big overarching storyline as much as I just like. Here's the monster. Here's Mulder. Here's Scully. We'll be back in 45 minutes. Have a good time. So a lot of my favorite. So when I go down my list of favorite episodes, it's like Darkness Falls, Beyond the Sea, Pusher's a great episode. You know, the episodes that are just one-off monster of the week. I think my favorite plot episodes are the Scully gets abducted 3-parter in season 2, because those are just 3 really excellent episodes, and the 2 episodes from season 4 where Mulder goes to Russia for reasons that are too complicated to go into right now, because again, they're just really intense, dark episodes, because season 4 was really dark.
Yes, let's see. So one more question to finish up, I think. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody first. Give me just a sec. Addie's going, sometimes that show is very much a 90s sci-fi, which makes sense, all things considered. So, because that's what it was. Connor asks, any love for Memoirs of a Cigarette Smoking Man?
I don't know. I like it.
You're allowed to refuse to answer that too, if you'd like.
No. I do think I want to answer that because I write too much about the X-Files to like dodge X-Files questions. So I think that Memoirs of a Cigarette Smoking Man is a really good showcase for some really good moments, and also kind of why the plot arc for the X-Files fell apart in the later seasons, because it's clearly retconned nonsense. Though I do really love the like life is like a box of chocolates speech he gives at the end, partially because it's really funny and partially because I hate Forrest Gump.
Those are all valid thoughts. Let's see. So to finish up with you, my dear, one last question. Think. So, yeah. Did you like doing MacDeath?
I did. I originally had the idea because I played through it with one of my other campaigns. I played a halfling barbarian who, during the werewolf fight, because they were awakened, just didn't put on any clothes.
Naked D&D, the best kind.
Dicks out for Scotland was the joke.
Yay! Love it.
I really didn't. I said this several times, and it still completely blows my mind. When I came up with this idea of doing a charity stream based on this, I figured I'll do it myself. I'll do all the technical stuff myself. Maybe I'll get a retweet from the Worlds Elsewhere Twitter account. So the degree to which so many people just stepped up to help me do this and to make it into the best I think it could be just completely floored me. And honestly, it's made me want to do stuff like that more with y'all, because y'all are great. It's a great group. I think doing D&D with actors is just like the best shit you can do, because they're going to get really into the character stuff and they're not going to rules lawyer you.
Well, we had
Yeah.
a lot of fun too. And it's obviously not going to be something we can do very often, but we are always looking for more content in between the 4 main stage shows that we can do. So it's definitely another collaboration like this with you as DM or someone else is something we're definitely open to. Certainly not this year, because this year we are filling up that calendar. But
Back to the gills.
for future years, it's definitely something. And we were very excited with how well the donations went, and the ability to be able to make donations like that is one of the things that we love being able to do. We got a lovely thank you letter. I mean, it's a form letter, but still, from Amnesty thanking us for the donation and all of that good stuff. So that's really cool. And sadly, it wasn't very pretty, which is why we didn't put it up when we announced the final total that had been donated and received earlier in the week. But yeah, no, they got it, and they said thank you, and that was great. So I think we're gonna finish up now. So just a last few things for everybody. If you look in the description of this video, you will see links to the stream itself, the program, which contains character bio information and a little more information about where this idea came from and Amnesty and all of that good stuff. We are a charity, and we work off of donations and pay what you can, what you like, ticket sales for our shows. But we also still encourage people to donate to the charities that we support. So if you want to kick some money Amnesty's way, there's a link for that in the doobly-doo as well. And then there were 2 total donor rewards for this one. This is the second one, and the first one was our own MacBeath, Mike Fadum reciting rather the speech tomorrow, and that is also linked in the doobly-doo for this video. And definitely, if you aren't already, pick a social media and follow us, because that is the best way to keep an eye out on what's coming up next. Many of our shows are completely open when it comes to casting and crew. So if you'd like to be involved in the kind of work that we do, we're always excited to bring in new people. And we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up soon. So definitely, we're just finishing up our Black History Month series. We're going to be doing another series of essays for Women's History Month. And then again, we've got Shakespeare in early spring, in April, and lots of other stuff we'll be announcing soon. So definitely keep an eye out. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me today and answering all of our terrible questions. And now we're going to hand this over to some music so that we can have some title card at the end. But everybody who joined us in chat, thank you so much. Anyone who joins us later, thank you so much. Everyone for supporting the work that we do and the work that groups like Amnesty International do. We really appreciate it, and we were so glad to have you.